Hey everyone, it's Carolyn Moore from the Modern Widows Club, and tonight we have part 3 of our spiritual series about getting in touch and engaged with all of our senses. And for those of you who have been on the call before, you know Rabbi Jason Sobel. Rabbi Jason, I saw that you had a new book. I just got your email, The Aligning with God's Appointed Times, Discover the Prophetic and Spiritual Meaning of the Biblical Holidays. And so I just want to say, of course, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, Shana Tova.
That's right. And we also have, I asked Jen Fortune to go ahead and come on and co-host for us because why not? She was awesome last time, and I really loved watching the video of part 2 after I had to step away when I was in Denver. And this week I'm in Arkansas having some Modern Widows Club meetings. And so it's kind of exciting to have us all back together. Let me see if I can make now, I think Rabbi Jason's highlighted right now. What do you see, Jen?
I see the 3 of us.
Okay, perfect. So I changed it to gallery view, so maybe we can all see each other. But I just want to welcome everybody. I think we have about 60 people signed up for tonight, and we will be sending you tomorrow or the day after the recording of this. And hopefully you got the recording of the first and second one because I got to watch it. But sometimes there's a little bit of a lag because of whatever's happening at Modern Widows Club. But I'm excited. I just asked Rabbi Jason what the topic tonight was going to be, and he said touch, and to talking about loneliness. And this is going to be a very hot topic for our ladies because loneliness and the lack of being hugged and touched is very real for us. So I look forward to all the blessings that you're going to bestow upon everyone here. So thank you, Jen, and thank you, Rabbi Jason, for being here tonight.
Absolutely. I'm excited. It's always a joy. I love what you all are doing at the Modern Widows Club. So it's an honor to be able to be involved.
So tonight we're talking about touch and loneliness, and I really learned a lot for the site. And touch is when you go from literally one day hugging and holding someone's hand to just really nothing, from that loved one of yours. I mean, how, from a biblical standpoint, I mean, what would you advise? Like if you were meeting with a brand new widow, how do you talk to them? What do you say? I mean, obviously in the beginning, you're not talking about that, but after a while, women, I'm sure, have come to you and said, I have this desire. And I can tell you that a lot of times it sometimes can go in a wrong direction with touch, and it's, I don't really want to say wrong because I'm just like, everyone just craves that connection, that physicality of it. And so I always recommend people like to get your nails done or even massages or just, holding someone's hand while you pray, like any kind of real touch, being around children where you need to hold their hand when they're walking, all of those different things. But I'm sure that you have a lot more to share tonight from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to begin, spiritual touch is a really important spiritual sense. It's important emotionally on every level. There's a story that from many years ago, I was living in North Carolina, and there was a woman we were friends with, and she had a baby that was in the hospital sick and ultimately passed, but it was really tragic. But I remember coming out of the hospital from seeing her, and there was this older woman, would be like my grandmother's age at the time, and she was just crying and weeping, and people were just walking past her.
Oh my
and
God.
I was just blown away how how like no one stopped. And so I stopped. I stopped. I went over to her. I had a couple people with me. I said, are you okay? What's going on? She's like, well, she goes, my son just died of cancer, and I'm just so sad. And she's crying, and she's like, and no one's really, been to see me or been to see him. And, we just put our hands on her, and, we prayed for her, and we wound up giving her a hug, and you could just see just a little bit of the weight,
Mm-hmm.
you know, begin to, you could see the comfort, some comfort begin to come to her, because it's just like when we're going through these situations and circumstances, you know, the power of touch is just so significant. The power of touch is just, you know, so meaningful. Of, you know, our sense of touch is distributed throughout our entire bodies. Our skin has more than 4 million sensory receptors. You know, it's one of the most
Yeah.
essential aspects. It's one of the most pervasive and important of all of the senses. And it's just so significant. I think that, you know, and there's healing power in touch that we really can't underestimate. I just think of so many stories in the scripture. You know, one story that comes to mind is that there was a woman who had an issue with a flow of blood for 12 years, who had not been able to find any healing or wholeness. Now, from a Jewish perspective, the Hebrew scriptures tell us that a person who has a flow of blood, whether they're a man or a woman in any way, becomes what's known as ritually unclean. And that meant that, you know, if she had a husband, he couldn't touch her, her family couldn't touch her, her friends couldn't touch her. And this woman had probably not been touched in a loving or in an intimate way for 12 years. I mean, that's an incredibly long period of time. And she must have felt lonely, excluded socially, relationally from the community. And this woman saw Yeshua, Jesus, in a crowd, and she reached out and she grabbed the hem of his garment, and power left his body, and she wound up being healed. And then Yeshua says, "Who touched me?" Because I mean, I mean, in Jewish culture and religious Jewish culture, women and men don't touch, right?
Right.
You touch your husband, you touch those that are close to you, but opposite sex don't touch, that have no relationship or a close relationship. And so this was a really bold move. It took a lot of chutzpah, as we'd say, but this woman was in such a state of desperation, you know, and she did what most people would never do. She reached out and touched the hem, the ritual fringes, the seat of his garment. And normally he would have been unclean, but instead she not only became clean, she was instantaneously healed. And this communicates to us that there's great healing in touch.
Amen.
And sometimes what we need to do is just grab hold of God. Sometimes we just need to reach out and touch someone, because there's just powerful healing in the power of touch. And other times, oftentimes when God sent messengers to heal people, or Jesus himself, he often he usually touched people. So that scene about the woman reaching out and touching him, the very next verses that we read about is that he went in to see this girl, 12 years of age, that had passed, and he touched her. He took her by the hand and said, "Child, get up." And she was healed, and she got up. And so he constantly touched people, put his hands on people. There's all sorts of stories about him touching people and people getting healed. And it's just a reminder of the healing power and the significance of touch. I mean, when I was younger, I wanted to become a doctor of Eastern medicine,
You're
of
still
Oriental
young,
medicine.
Rabbi Jason. You're still
When I was really young, like in my teens, late teens, early 20s, I wanted to become a doctor of Oriental medicine. I actually trained to become a masseuse. So I studied like shiatsu and different types of massage. And one of the things we do is that our school would go and give massages to AIDS babies, or babies that had been abandoned.
Oh, wow.
Because babies that don't have touch,
Yeah.
their immune systems wither, They have a higher mortality rate because of that lack of touch.
Mhm.
They have greater anxiety because touch, it not only affects our immune system, and touch increases immunity on a physical level, but also touch provides a sense of well-being and emotional safety and security that's created by the power of touch. And so we need to be touched. We can't underestimate the power of that. And that's why I love what you're doing, because if you're alone, you need to find people in your life that are safe. You know, there's a lot of people that are maybe not safe, but people that are safe that can give you a hug. Sometimes there's nothing more powerful than a hug.
Can I say something
Yeah.
here? You know, this is so fitting because I'm just going to be raw and vulnerable here. I had some really hard things happen in the last 48 plus hours. And I actually was crying out to God, like, Lord, I just need a hug. And, you know, I'm alone. I'm alone, like, you know, a lot of our widows. And I was like, really, Lord, I just need a hug. I just want to be held. And I was listening to a song that's called Hold Her. And I was like, Lord, I just really want to be held. And the next day, a good friend of mine offered to give me a massage. So I went to her home and she gave me a massage. And as I was on her table and she was, you know, loving on me and giving me that massage of healing, I was like, I told her, I said, I had been praying to the Lord that I would just be held, you know, and this touch is so important. And I started sharing with her how I didn't realize the gift of massage until Stephen passed away. And that was like immediately what I invested into myself was massage. I would get a massage at least once a month because that was the physical touch that I so craved. And it just, you know, what you're saying resonates so true to me because I had just been crying out to him that I needed touch. And then he fulfilled that. He answered right away and he gave me exactly what I needed right at that moment. He's so faithful.
Mm.
It's so true. And, you know, it's like, I think about all the times that were really meaningful at our leadership conference and at our widow empowerment events, right? Like I remember when we did the plate breaking ceremony, that it's almost as if the ladies intuitively knew to create this tunnel where their hands touched and then everybody walked underneath it. And I remember thinking, I didn't even plan that. Like the women just all of a sudden said, oh, let's do this and let's touch hands. And then the women can walk underneath and we can all, you know, pray or speak affirmations when she's coming through the tunnel. And I was the one that was the very last one. So I got the longest tunnel. And I remember thinking something happened when I went through this tunnel of all these women touching hands. And like, it was such a powerful moment. It's like they weren't touching me, but they were touching me. They were piercing my soul with the ways that they were bonding and that energy, you know. And then when I, you know, broke my plate, it was just like all of them like exploded and it was just like they all started hugging. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, this is like a miracle moment. All these women hugging each other just intuitively. And it was just, Jen was there. She was taking pictures and she took a lot of the pictures. And I just remember thinking, this is not something that you can write into a program. This is just something that happens in the miracle of the moment. And so I saw how powerful the touch was for our community. And I think, you know, COVID has been extremely hard for our community. How do you get that if you're completely isolated? Because you can only do it through words. And I'm sorry, but, you know, I'm happy that we have Zoom, but it's just not the same as sitting in the same room with you, Rabbi, and having your hands on me and going, let me pray for you. Okay, let's do that.
You know, what you're saying right there too is when COVID first started and we were taking gifts to our widows and dropping it on the doorsteps, you know, that we weren't really touching them, but we were giving them those gifts. Well, one of my widows, she opened her door and she was like, don't go anywhere. And I was like, okay. And this was right when it was fresh, just started. And I was like, oh, and she's an older woman. And so I was like kind of nervous to be too close. And she just looked at me and she's like, come inside. I'm like, okay. So I went inside and we sat there. I mean, we didn't sit there, we stood there talking. And before I left, she just looked at me so longingly with her eyes. They were just like she needed a hug. So I hugged her. I mean, there was nothing else I could do. I couldn't just leave without hugging her. And sometimes you just have to pray that it's going to be okay and just do it. I don't know how
Yeah.
else to say it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think I guess what I'm saying is that we all have emotional needs.
Yes.
And one of those emotional needs is healthy affection.
Mm-hmm.
And touch is a key part of having that emotional need of affection. And we shouldn't feel ashamed for expressing the need for it, or like the woman who reached out and touched Yeshua Jesus. Sometimes we just need to be like bold, and we need to ask for it, or ask God to send it for us. And if affection is expressing care and closeness through physical touch and through words, right? So it's that sense of, and really the most powerful level of affection is that sense of care and closeness that's created through both physical touch and the words that go along with it, right? So it's holding someone's hand, it's putting your hand on their shoulder, it's giving them a hug, it's giving them a kiss, whether it's platonic or romantic, and saying I love you, or I care about you, or I'm here for you. And Romans 12:10 says this, that it says, be tenderly devoted to one another in brotherly and sisterly love. It also goes on and say in the scriptures, greet one another with a holy kiss. And because, again, there's, scripture is real, and there's wisdom in there. And it's just, again, this idea of touch and connection, the point of contact that's created, right, Melissa, right? There's energy and life that is transferred through touch. And, never underestimate the power of a hug. A hug can change a life.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget when I was growing up, my dad was really passionate about golf, and there was a golfer who was really a great golfer by the name of Greg Norman, and he was very stoic, and a lot of golfers were intimidated by him. And when he was young, he tells the story, he'd get off the plane and he'd want to hug his dad, and his dad would only like shake his hand, so he got very little affection. And so in the 1996 Masters golf tournament, he was ahead, he was leading, and he wound up losing to another golfer, his rival by the name of Nick Faldo. He wound up blowing a significant lead. And when he was done, Nick came over and gave him a hug, and this big hug, and the two men embraced, and Nick and Greg Norman just cried. He just cried. And people thought he was crying because he'd lost. And in a later interview, he said, I didn't cry because I lost. I've lost lots of golf matches. I'll lose many more golf matches in the history of my golf career. He says, the reason why I cried is because I never felt that the type of love I felt from another man before. I never had a hug in my life like the hug that I got from Nick when he hugged me at that moment that I lost and he won.
Oh, wow.
It's just so powerful, so significant. Doesn't matter what age you are, how young, how old. I remember when my kids were little, they used this expression, when they needed some love, they'd say, I need some love in my love tank. My love tank is low. All of us have a love tank, and, it was a sign that they were expressing they wanted to cuddle or receive a hug or, some connection. And so that's the power of touch, because touch creates connection. it creates connection on a physical, which is obvious, but also on the spiritual and emotional. And I've seen people just literally healed or begin the healing process by receiving a hug. You know, I love to give people a hug. I mean, because so many times people feel alone, and or they, they come from a family where, it was not, their physical affection, physical connection was not something that was a regular occurrence.
Yeah, we have a couple of comments here. Like Melissa says, hugs are so important and they can't be discarded during COVID. I think we always need to be safe. However, the practice of consent still and always applies, like with the we should hug you. I think it's great when someone asks, like, can I give you a hug? And you give them that consent. Some people were leery about that. Penny did a Q&A, and for everybody on the call, you can, there's on the a lower bar of your webinar, there's a Q&A, and you can post questions, and I'll be happy to present those to Rabbi Jason or Jen or me. But you also have a chat feature, so you can chat over to the right. So if you'll find that, you can talk. Penny wrote a Q&A and said, I fear I will never feel the hug of another person. How do I accept that? And I'd like to take a stab at this before Rabbi Jason does. And I would say the first thing, fear is leading that thought. And so if we can switch your actual comment to, I love the fact that someday in the future, someone will hug me. And I don't doubt that that will happen. And so we sometimes have to change our words and say, what's the most loving thing I can say? Because that sentence is, your second word is, your first two words are I fear. And so we have to catch ourselves when we are self-talking in that, because it's totally natural to feel these fears, but we can't let those thoughts be our predominant thought, because it's a lie. It's truly a lie. Like literally, Penny, if like I meet you someday, I'm gonna hug you. So I'm gonna be one of those people that are going to hug you in the future. And I'm just gonna be one of many. Because if you come to a Modern Widows Club event, you can hug a lot of people. So I can guarantee you, but I understand how that fear can be very overpowering and kind of overrun, like be a forever thought. And I think that's, I don't know what you want to say about it, Jen or Rabbi Jason, but that's how I kind of see the thought when I see, because I have read my journals in the past and I see myself write like that. And I'm like, that's just not an actual truthful statement. I have a lot of people, and honestly, I just recently had something really hurtful happen in my life. And it was a direct comparison to when my husband passed away, where I had very few people really come and support me. And yet this time around, 20 years later, I've built a life where I can't even keep up with the amount of comments and the emails and the texts, including the Jen and Rabbi Jason. And I realized, wow, my life has completely changed, where I have a lot of people who want to hug and support me. And it was a completely different experience, and that can happen for you too.
I'll just say something really quick, Liz. I agree with Carolyn, you know, watching your words, and that's what we talked about the last time we were doing this. Was Rabbi Jason was speaking about pay and being careful with our words. And I also, when I'm reading what you wrote, how do I accept that? You don't have to accept that. You don't have to accept that story in your head saying that you feel like you'll never hug another person. It makes me want to climb through my computer and hug you right now. I don't even know where you are, but I want to go there and hug you. Even if I have to wear a hazmat suit, I will hug you. But it's listening to those stories in our heads, acknowledging it, and rewriting that story by telling yourself and speaking to yourself and reaching out to somebody that you know in your area, in your life, that will come out and hold your hand or hug you. You get to recreate that story. I'll come hug you. I don't know where you are. Tell me where you are and I'll come hug you.
I just sent everybody an air hug, and that'll just have to be so we can have a full hug.
I want to say one more thing too, because Rabbi Jason was talking about how he hugs, you know, and this, I have a prayer wall in my room. And one of the pictures on my prayer wall is Rabbi Jason hugging me in the Jordan River.
Oh, yeah.
To me, that, because I'm not a hugger, even though I said I would come hug you, I'm becoming a hugger, but really I'm that kid that was not loved when I was a kid. And so it's taken me a while to get used to hugs. And that picture is so significant to me because him holding me and hugging me in the river was like the Father's love just embracing me. And so every time I look at that picture, I just remember how I felt at that moment, so loved by the Lord. And it's really, really significant.
Oh, yeah. And I love what you said before, Jen. I mean, both of you, I mean, everything y'all are saying. I mean, I think, you know, yes, ask another person, express your needs. And that's part of the fear sometimes that we need to move past is our fear. A lot of times it can be scary to express our needs because, you know, we can fear rejection, or maybe we're not used to making our needs known, or maybe we've not in our life circumstance have been a place where that's something we've been able to express freely. But I think that's really important. But I also think, like you did, Jen, to pray that God would send someone to provide touch, you know, and he answered, right? And so that's, you know, it's really, I love that. And I think it's just an important thing to keep in mind. And I think that, you know, again, if there's power in words, like you said, Carolyn, like we talked about last time, and, you know, we don't want to go to the place of hopelessness, because hope is the belief that our future is going to be better than our past. And there's always hope. And so we want to keep that in mind. And you know, but I think as kind of shifting it a little bit, you know, I think as we just entered into the new Jewish New Year last weekend. And it's, I believe one of the themes of this year is a time to possess your promises. We're not going to get into all that, but at the Jewish New Year, it celebrates the birthday of the world, the birthday of creation. This is a time, according to Jewish tradition, that the first man and woman, humanity, was created at this time. And the interesting thing is, this is in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. We read for the first time that God says something is not good. And he was basically the statement is proclaiming that there's something missing. There's something that's not good. It means there was something missing or something lacking. And so when God says something is not good, we really need to stop and take notice. But it's a little bit hard to believe that in the place called Eden, there was something not good. And, you know, Adam lived in a place that seemed like paradise. He lived in a place where there was no traffic, no stress, no politics, no sickness, no conflict, no crime, no bills to be paid. I mean, there was perfect shalom, perfect peace. It was a pain-free environment. There was no loss, right? And even in the midst of all that, God announces that there was something not good. And this is still what Adam and Eve was. This was still what Adam was pure and innocent, and all was good in the hood when this was said. You know, but you know, so what could Adam have wanted, right? I mean, every need was provided for, but Adam seemed to have it all. But he had no lack of food. He didn't have to worry about money. He never got sick. You know, he had a face-to-face, intimate relationship with God. God was his BFF. You know, so what could have not been good? I mean, Adam was even made, in a sense, the CEO of creation. But what was not good was that Adam was alone. And that's a significant statement, because Adam had a relationship with God. But the reality is that that man was not only designed as a spiritual being, but as a relational being. So Adam not only had spiritual, he also had physical needs. He had relational needs that needed to be met. And being alone was not good. But this still seems strange because Adam had a perfect, intimate relationship with God. So how could it say that Adam was alone? Because, and this is the radical thing, is that yes, Adam not only had spiritual needs, but he had relational ones that only another human being could meet. Adam needed not only spiritual intimacy and connection, but he needed relational intimacy and connection. Adam could not get certain needs met by God. God is not enough. Don't stone me. But God is not enough. And that's really important to understand. It might seem like a radical message, but God will not meet all of your needs. So one of the greatest false beliefs that damages people and greatly affects our ability to bring healing into the world is this idea that God is all I need. God is not all you need. Adam was created with the need for human relationships. That was part of the divine design. Adam was not spiritually alone, but he was interpersonally alone. And even though he walked and talked with God, God said there was something not good. You know, God is all you need for your spiritual needs, in a sense, for the abundant life, for redemption. But Adam needed someone to take away his aloneness other than God himself. And aloneness is something that preceded the crisis that happened in the very beginning. And so we were created for both divine and human relationships, and we can't be whole or happy without them. So I think sometimes we get in this thing as God is all I need, and it's just not true. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. I want you guys to share whatever you want to think. But I think there's a lot of people that feel guilt and shame and condemnation because they feel, well, if I was really spiritual, or people tell them, well, you should just pray. You should, you don't really, you shouldn't really feel that. Isn't God enough for you, friends? That's lies. It's craziness. It's not true. I mean, that's why, behold how good and how pleasant it is when brothers and sisters dwell together in unity. And we were created for community, and that's why Modern Widows Club and what you all are doing is so important, because community is key. Connection is key. That is part of the divine design, and we should never minimize that and the importance of it.
I agree. So I two things. Since you're introducing us to this amazing God that we all love and you love, number one, we need to know all of your single available friends for our, so we can fulfill this. Okay, you got to give
right.
All
right. I'll make a list.
Number two, talk about good in the hood and healthy affection. We all kind of noticed on the last call that you are wearing a little bit more jewelry.
Yes, I am married.
And so we wanted to hear a little bit and maybe congratulate you and just say how happy we are for you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, God is good. For those of you who know my story, I'm not going to go too much into it, but I experienced some loss, and I was alone for a little while, but God brought an amazing woman into my life. Her name is Miriam. She's from Australia, now here, and it's been amazing. So I mean, I know what it's like, and it's hard because sometimes, like, you can be in you can even be in the context of marriage and relationship and still be alone, because you can be in a situation where the person that you're with has past hurts and woundedness, and I understand that, and so I think that it is life-giving, obviously, to be in a relationship where you can have that intimacy and affection. And I know how hard it is not to have that. And, you know, so thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jen and Carolyn. So yeah, God is good. You know, I think, you know, and you might have talked, but I think that, you know, I think we mentioned this before, but I think God not only wants to heal our hurts, he wants to redeem them. You know, meaning he wants to turn them around and bring good and bring healing and blessing out of them, not only for ourselves, but also for other people.
Well, thanks for sharing that. We know that was a private, obviously I've known for a while and had to keep it quiet. And I did a good job at that.
Thank
no
you,
one
thank
knew.
You. Very good.
But when you
on,
when he had his ring on, we were all like, did anybody else notice? And I'm like, yeah, I knew they would. So, but yes, but that, you know, I'm so glad, I'm sorry, someone said, I'm so glad that, thanks, Rabbi, for the validation that God is not enough. And, you know, because not every one of our ladies, you know, because when you start talking about touch, you start talking, of course, about a partner, right? And then that means typically you'll be starting to date. You know, a lot of our older ladies, you know, just ladies in general, do not want to remarry. It's just statistically, actually, some women traditionally, I was just with Dee Dee this weekend. She's like, no way, I'm 95 years old. That's never going to happen, you know. And so, but I actually know people, you know, widows in their later years where they do repartner in their 80s and in their 90s, and it's companionship. And it's still that, let me touch your hand, let me hold your hand when you walk, you know, that's still that really powerful touch. And so, but that's also a hard thing too, because I think it's like my daughter, for some reason, I have one daughter that's really affectionate and I have another daughter who's not very affectionate. She's never really been that cuddly child. And so I always have to be like really careful about when I want to hug her, because she almost like doesn't want to, but she's also my daughter who really tries to put up a really strong front. And so what would you say about people who like put up a big wall and they are scared to let someone touch them or them to feel that emotion? You know, what kind of guidance or advice would you give them if they're just like, no, I just, you know, I'm going to do my own thing?
I mean, I think obviously that, you know, a key part of connection is building trust, right? So you obviously want to build trust with that person, because, you know, they have to feel, if you're going to be, if there's ever any hope of establishing a physical touch connection or even being affectionate, they have to feel safe. So I think, you know, you have to build trust. And I think part of that feeling, that trust, is, you know, that other person feels really seen and known. I mean, one of the greatest human needs that people have is feeling seen and known, right? And we see this in Yeshua. Jesus does this so well on so many occasions. I mean, there's the woman who's accused of adultery, and the religious leaders want to like condemn her, and he steps in. He squats down in the dirt, and he gets down right where she's at on eye level, right? Everyone else is standing over. He just gets right down, right where she's at, because number one, he's going to meet her where she's at, because that's part of what love and affection does.
Mm-hmm.
But part of it is he wants her to feel seen and known.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to get to understand people, help them to feel seen and known, and try and understand to the best of our abilities, like what makes them feel seen and known, because there are different love languages. And, you know, some people, physical touch and affection is really important. Some people, it's words of Some people, it's acts of service. You you know, so there's different love languages, and we have to learn to speak the love language of the person we're trying to connect with, or else, because if we, most of the time we want to speak with them from our own love language. But if your love language is an affection and someone else is gifts or acts of service, you know, no matter how much you hug them, they're still not going to have their emotional love tank filled, right? Because oftentimes we want to give love the way we want to receive love. And that's where we have to understand love languages. We have to understand the person, and that's part of being seen and known. And we have to also know ourselves enough and have the courage to share that. And I think even having open conversation, hey, look, I care about you, and you know, I'm a person who likes to express myself through touch, you know, are you okay with that? What, you know, just having that conversation.
Yeah, I remember when, you know, you're talking about getting on someone's level and being right there. When I went on the Oprah show, and in the backstage when we walked off with me and my young daughters, they probably were like 8 and 10 then. And Oprah had this little glass heart, and she got down on her knees to talk to them and to give it to her. And she leaned in and she said, "Girls, I have something to tell you. Girls, grow up and be smart girls, because smart girls will change the world for the better." And I was just sitting there going, okay, Oprah just got down on her knees to talk to my daughters. Did anybody else see this? And it was like this moment where I really respected her, because she understood that. Like, I need to get eye to eye to them, and the only way to do that. One of the things, what Penny had written a question here, it says, when I talk about no hugs as a reality, I mean, that is my situation. I was widowed in 1997. I live alone. I'm 74 tomorrow. Well, happy early birthday, Penny. And my family is staying away because the worry of me getting sick. 6 years ago this week, one of my sons died. So this is especially harder emotionally time for you. I pray every day. I ask God to send someone with a human face. I agree with what you are saying, and I reached out. Is there anything else I can do? You know, the question here is, where do you, at some point, I think you're coming over in a mask even. You know, you can hug, you can touch in a mask. I'm not sure why someone can't come over even at 74 with a mask on. I've gotten on 2 airplanes since COVID started, and Rabbi Jason's gotten on a lot more than me. But I think that people can, and I think sometimes we have to use our voice, and say, I'm ready now, and I need someone to come over here right now. Who's going to be the first one to get here? I've got like a hug waiting for you. Sometimes we have to be that catalyst, that spark, right? And we have to fight and ask for what we need. And now is the time for you, Penny, to do that. Right? Aside from getting a pet that is you're going to be able to hug and, you know, hugs you back, you're going to have to say, I want you to come now. And you're also going to have at the same time say, what if I'm going to have to face this fear of what if they are asymptomatic? What if they do give me the virus? At that point in time, it's like, with the hug, with the exposure, you know, you have to debate that, right? But what I found is in my situation, I didn't speak up enough. When I felt more of like a victim, and I felt a lot like that. I'll just admit to you. But when I broke out of that, I went, wait a second, these are my needs. I have a voice. I need to ask for what I need. And widows are notorious for not asking for what they need. And it's just something I've noticed over the years, where we act like asking for something is like out of desperation instead of self-care. And it's in fact the complete opposite. Because when you ask say, I need help and I need you to come here to be with me now. That isn't a weak moment. That's a strong moment. That's inviting someone into your own healing experience and opportunity. And so I would, you know, my job as a widow mentor is to challenge people. And I think for you, this is an important time. You lost your son this week, 6 years ago, and you need someone to come and be with you. And I hope, you know, I hope that whoever you reach out to, someone will show compassion to you and will come over and be that face to face that you so desire. Because I do believe it can happen, but you are going to have to fight for your right to party, as I often say. And so I hope that you will do that. And that's an empowerment move for you. That's what we teach here at Modern Widows Club is, I'm not here to make your choices. I'm here to say, well, these are some of the experiences that I've witnessed, and here's what I've seen other women do, right? But the courage for you to actually step up in your own life is all going to be you. And you are the one that gets the reward at the end of feeling that joy and that empowerment, though no one gets to take that away from you. So I hope that it works out and someone comes and sits beside you. And I hope that they come and listen and have that special moment with you.
I second everything that Carolyn is saying right now. And I also encourage you to reach out and speak up for yourself and count that as courage. But I'm going to pray with you and agree in prayer that as you ask God to send you a hug, a real life, warm, human touch hug, that he will make it happen in the name of Yeshua Jesus. So you let us know when that happens, because we want to hear the testimony and we want to hear the story. Because if, you know, I shared my testimony earlier, that it can happen.
Yeah, and I think just going back to, you know, one of the things, and maybe she wants to tell us where she lives. Maybe someone is there.
Where do you live? Tell us. I'm in South Illinois. Where are you?
Penny, where do you live?
Where do you live, Penny? Yeah, penny for your thoughts. Where's a nickel for your kiss? Yeah. Let us know, Penny.
Bonnie said, Bonnie, did you want to speak? She had her hand up. I need to know. Bonnie says, I can understand, Penny. I get it. It would take a thunderbolt for me to consider dating. And then I wrote, Bonnie, you're a hot catch. Because she is. So Bonnie is one of my she's on our Wise Widow Advisory Council. That's actually a thing within our organization, because whenever I am totally confused about something, I go straight to the Wise Widows. I mean, usually I would say like 70 and above. Because these women lived in a different type of generation where they're like, you don't speak up, you don't get anything done. Today I was at an art museum and they had a Billie Holiday, the jazz singer exhibit, and I was blown away by her life. She did not like people touching her. And the reason why is because she was raped when she was a young girl, when she was 12, 13, 14. And so she learned to survive by singing. And if you've ever heard Billie Holiday sing, you can feel her emotions. Like you don't have to be touched when you hear Billie Holiday singing, you feel it with her voice. And so she found this other way to communicate touching, because she didn't feel safe being touched. And I just thought that was really, it kind of blew me away, because she was so powerful on stage. And, you know, she died at 44. She died very young, but she was just very distant physically. And she, every relationship she had was a man who was abusive. So she never knew what, you know, a healthy touching relationship was. And I think that really played into her music and why it was so powerfully sad, and why she could sing the way she did, because she poured her emotions into that voice. So in that respect, it was channeled into something, you know, that we all got to enjoy, and just as music. But her own life was very much of a kind of a tragedy in many ways, because she was unable, because touch rejected her. You know, she never was able to get past that in her life. But hopefully, Bonnie's like, yes, above 70 are definitely wise women. Oh.
So Penny says that she lives in Greenville, Delaware. So we have
Well,
to
I've
find.
never been to Delaware, so I don't know anyone in Delaware. Okay, good to know. Good to know. We don't have a Modern Widows Club chapter there, unfortunately, but we would love to have one there. But I think maybe sometimes, because it's so ambiguous, right? Like, I need a hug. I think maybe you should sit down and like write a list of the people that you would like to contact, right? And then I don't know if you text or how you communicate, but you know, nowadays so many people don't answer phone calls, unfortunately, because there's, you know, sales calls and things like that. But I think what I would do is make a list, and then I would honestly, because I'm such a practical thinker, I'm like, who would most say yes? And I'll start with that top person, right? Like, I know who those people are in my life. It's like, well, probably my best friend Renee, you know, probably, and maybe my neighbor Linda. Oh my, definitely my neighbor across the street, Ellen. Like you have to know like who your tribe is, who's your people, who can you call on. When I was raising my daughters, I had a grandmother, a teenager, a mother, a neighborhood friend on speed dial for my daughters, right? Because life happens at different times. Sometimes I needed someone different in the morning, then I needed someone in the afternoon, then I needed on the weekend. And so you almost have to break it down like that. So if you have a need, I bet you, Penny, if you made a list of the people that you want to call, and then start with that top one that you think will say yes. Don't like wear yourself out with this long list of and be rejected by people. Start with that top one. And I would hope that someone in your top three would say yes, and say, I, you know, make the date. Come this day, this time, and let's do it. So that would just be my suggestion. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. And I think it's just important to know in this context of this discussion is that you were created needy. You were created to be needy. You were created to need other people. And so there's no shame in feeling needy. There is no shame in having emotional needs and voicing those needs to get met. You shouldn't feel like, oh, I'm imposing, or I don't want to be a bother. I mean, it's not true. And let's be people that not just look to have our needs met, which is important, but also look to be there to help meet the needs of other people. And so we're in this very significant spiritual time on the Hebrew calendar and in the Jewish cycle of things. And in ancient times, King Herod the Great built this house for God called the Temple in Jerusalem, and it was one of the wonders of the ancient world. And in the most special place, the most spiritual place, the most holy place was known as the Holy of Holies, where there was the Ark of the Covenant that God had spoken to Moses about designing. And that actually, that was in the first temple, the Ark of the Covenant, Solomon's temple. But there was this Ark, and that where the presence of God was believed to dwell. The 10 Commandments were in there. And on top of the Ark, there were these two golden angels that were embracing one another, these cherubs. And so the Ark, which symbolized God's presence dwelling between the faces of those cherubim, I mean, this was depicted, God's presence was depicted by the sacred relationship of two angels touching, because because touch is the most intimate of senses. And there's this idea that God dwells in the space between two faces. right? It's in the context of there's something sacred about relationship. There's something sacred about friendship. There's something sacred about community. And the most intimate is that sense of touch, that sense of physical, that sense of affection created by both verbal and physical connection. And so I just pray that for all of you. Just pray that for all of you, and that God should give you those relationships that are sacred and special, and to be sure that you really treasure those relationships and nurture those relationships and invest in those relationships, because it's so easy to take them for granted or neglect them in the busyness and in the craziness of life. It's like relationships are like a plant. They have to be watered, they have to be nurtured, or else they wither. So that's my hope and prayer for all of you in this new year, that you'd have these relationships that flourish, and that sense of connection and affection in your life would just overflow, and would just bring such joy and peace and happiness.
Well, that's the promise you talk about, the time to possess the promise. I can tell you, I was so resistant to open up. I kind of resisted intimacy, newly in widowhood, and then just over time getting hurt. Right? You have to completely heal, and then you have to open your heart back up and try not to judge the situation. But what I found is a really great way to start to open up was to giving to others, volunteering or helping. And that can, I found that to be anything from just giving the person next door a break and walking their dog for that. I mean, it just doesn't have to be something really out of the ordinary. But I started doing those things with my daughters, and I started realizing, wow, the more I give of myself, the less I actually think of my own problems, because I'm busy living a life that's connected. Now, it's not a relationship, it's not a romantic relationship, but those are the things that led me to it. So sometimes we want the 100% thing, right? But we're not doing any of the incremental things to slowly open up our heart, letting God work in those smaller steps. And I can tell you, even just recently, in my own personal life, I've had to reassess, why I stepped into a relationship and why certain things happened to me. And I have to say, it's like a week later, I realized, wow, I need to look at myself and why I would enter into a relationship that maybe someone wasn't ready to have one, right? Was that me not reading, the situation right? Or was that me picking someone who was emotionally unavailable because I'm emotionally really unavailable? And so I've had to really assess myself and go, I think you once you start opening up and becoming more loving, shockingly, people start showing up in your life that are, guess what, more open and more loving. I think that's just a dynamic that kind of works. And so the goal is to work on your own, thoughts of what's not possible, and then open up to what is possible. And I can tell you that this experience that I had recently really made me realize that, yeah, I'm not perfect, but there's forgiveness, and I'm going to keep working in those areas. I'm never going to be perfect. I'm not ever going to be. So first thing is to show compassion for yourself as you're growing, because as you're reaching out and you're connecting, there may be a chance you may get hurt, but you're also going to learn something in that, and that's valuable. So don't say no to something because you don't know what the end result is going to be, because the end result is always going to be a valuable lesson that was brought to you in the first place. So that's all I can say about that. Like Penny was talking about how she's lost a lot of friends, and that she has a lot of friends who are different religion and a different political affiliation. And there's a lot of that going on right now. We're all experiencing that. But here's my belief. There's also a lot of people who are your same political affiliation and they are your same religious affiliation. And you got to go find those people, right? Because those are your people. That's your tribe.
Yeah. But I also just want to say to that, it's kind of like, I want to be careful of my words because I want to say some strong words. But look, I'm not saying God. I'm not saying God doesn't. I'm not saying politics are unimportant. But what I am saying is that God could care less about your politics if you're gonna be so foolish as to not want to love and care for someone because they disagree with you. Because at the end of the day, both parties have issues. At the end of the day, people are all human and are all messed up in some ways. There's no perfect person. There's no perfect political party. And I mean, you can be passionate about whatever side of the spectrum that you're on, but I think that as soon as that crosses over into not wanting to connect with other people and put them down, I just think it's sad. People have missed the boat, and I think that grieves God's heart, and I think it's a sign of just unhealthiness and immaturity. Because look, we've had a lot of different presidents, some better, some worse, depending on your perspective, and we've survived them all. I mean, no president is the end of the world. No matter who gets elected, things change. God is bigger than that. Yeah. And we can't speak for the actions of other people, but let's purpose in our own lives not to be that person.
Can I say something too?
I just want to say one thing. I would say, Penny, I'm sorry for what you've gone through.
Right?
Because it's not right. And I'm sorry for that.
Yeah. And I want to go back to what Rabbi Jason was saying a little while ago too, that, and speak to the ladies that feel so alone and want a relationship, want that physical touch, and desire that so much.
I'm sorry, say that again.
No, I want to speak to the ladies that desire relationships and are desiring it and wanting it, or they don't even know that that's what they're desiring, but they miss that physical touch. I just want to say to them that it's okay to feel that way. And if you're not ready for a relationship, or even if you are, what Carolyn said, just be open, right? Work on yourself and be open, but also cultivate the friendships that you have around you. I have such beautiful friendships with girls, my girlfriends, my wisters, that it fulfills me I have those conversations that daily that fill me up. I have girlfriends that I can talk to and reach out to, but I've had to cultivate those relationships. It doesn't just come, you have to work at them. You have to make that effort to go talk to them. And I have friends, because I told you I'm not a touchy-feely person. I have a friend who will stick her nose in my ear and force me to be physical, have that physical touch with her. But it breaks that barrier, it breaks that wall that I have up. And, like what Rabbi Jason Carolyn said earlier, with being respectful of other people, but you can kind of you can feel somebody out with that, but don't be afraid to desire love and touch, but also be courageous and go create those friendships and relationships so you don't feel alone. And the religious and the political and all of that stuff, be mindful when you pick your friends. Make sure that you are respectful of each other and each other's thoughts and beliefs and all of that. But the most important thing is go and find friendships, go and cultivate them so you're not alone. And be okay with your girlfriend holding your hand or putting her arm around you and, giving you that sense of touch, because really it is okay. Find your tribe, yes.
Yeah. And one thing that struck me as a closing thought is that on the Jewish New Year, we read the story about Sarah and Abraham, and Sarah was barren. They had this promise that God was going to give them a child, and it was years and years and years of waiting, and it just seemed like it was impossible. There was no way. And it's interesting because they're waiting, and Abraham winds up going, and Sarah wind up going down to Egypt, and they wind up praying a blessing over Pharaoh, and that that God would bless them, that they'd be able to conceive. And then in the very next verses, Abraham and Sarah are conceived. And there's a principle that's taught through that, which is that the one in need who prays for another person with the same need receives the blessing. And so I think that it's really important that if you're lonely, to pray for someone else that you know is lonely. If you need touch, pray for someone else that you need also, that's in the same situation that needs touch. Or if it's finances, or if it's whatever it is, a friend. And really, so because I think when we ask for another and think about the other, there is a spiritual blessing. There is a principle of sowing and reaping that comes into effect. And I just want to encourage everyone with that.
Thank you so much. Well, we have I think 2 more in this series. Rabbi Jason hasn't decided on what the dates are going to be. You will, everyone that has signed up for part 1, 2, or 3 of the spiritual series, you will get an email on the dates for you to register. So we'll be letting you guys know what those are in the future. So I just want to thank you, Rabbi Jason. I'll get with you on that in the future. And thank you, Jen, for co-hosting. And maybe Jen can say a small prayer before we leave, because she is the widow whisperer, is what I call her. She says the greatest prayers. Or Rabbi Jason can, either one of you.
Why don't we tag team? I'll go first and you close it out.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you, Lord, for this time with our Wisters and Rabbi Jason. Lord, I just ask that you touch the heart of every widow and Wister that's in the sound of my voice right now, Lord, that you meet them in those spaces where they have great desire for human touch, Lord. I ask you to touch them with your Holy Spirit, Lord. Comfort them with your wings of love and send those hugs their way. And we want to hear those testimonies of you sending those hugs and that physical touch and meeting them where they're at. In the name of Yeshua, we thank you for Rabbi Jason for investing his time into our ministry, into our cause, Lord, and into our ladies, for his wisdom and his spiritual guidance, and for Carolyn for being just an incredible leader, incredible example, and just a beautiful soul that has brought us all together in the name of Yeshua.
And Lord, I just pray, Sim Shalom Tova Ubracha Chen V'Chesed Rachamim, that you should establish your peace, mercy, goodness, kindness, love, grace, and abundant blessings over everyone who's participating, everyone who we're connecting with and is connected right now on this call. And I just ask that this would be a season for that possession of that promise, that there'd be a boldness to speak what we need, to go after what we need. I just want to pray that each one would feel a hug from heaven. A hug from heaven. I pray that as you lie your head on your pillow, you would feel God's embrace, that you would know that you are loved, that you are valued, that you are special, that you are beautiful, that you are significant, that you're needed. And I just, Lord, just impress that upon everyone who's listening. And I just bless them in Yeshua's name with a sweet and good new year. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Well, there you go, everyone. You've received your blessing, and we will see you soon for part 4. And I'm looking forward to it. God bless everyone. Love you.
Thank you.
Bye.